Welcome to this interview, and thank you for coming. Perhaps you could introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about you and, who you are, etc.
Sure. So my name's Aaron Roberts. I am 38 years old. I am the founder of Perspective Intelligence, which is a open source cyber threat intelligence consultancy. And my background, I don't have a university degree. I dropped out to go and become an intelligence professional. But I've been around intelligence, cybersecurity and IT now for the last between 16 and 20 years, I would say. Part of that in the military, as a reservist, as a young man, and then full-time in the intelligence services before joining the private sector.
Yeah. So how did you end up in intelligence? How was that journey?
I mean, I always tell people this story, and I don't think anyone believes me, but I used to watch a lot of 24. I grew up in Gloucestershire, and I grew up around GCHQ. So I knew what GCHQ was and what it did.
Yeah, I guess everyone in the neighborhood knows.
Yeah. And it was one of those things where I had a couple of friends from school that went on to work there, and I was like, well, maybe I could do that. And one time they advertised in the local newspaper for intelligence support roles. I was like, it'd be funny. I'm not getting in, but how far could I get? And then lo and behold, about a year later, there I was in a building doing work. And that was bizarre to me.
Yeah, and everyone I talk to have different stories of how they got into intelligence. And I haven't found any commonalities yet, right? Because I was laser focused. I tried to tick off all the boxes, and then I met people on the way who saw me and gave me an opportunity, right? Other people like you fall into it like type of thing, right? What's the worst that can happen? I'm just going to apply, and then shoot.
It's one of those things, like exactly what you said. I was always interested in it anyway. So when I was going to leave school, I was thinking maybe join the military, maybe join the police, something like that. Basically, on mathematics, so the military was a bit of a non-starter really for like a full-time role. Mm-hmm. So I sort of went away. I thought I'd go to university. I was going to become a football coach. That was my plan. That didn't work out, obviously. And then my mum was sick with breast cancer.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, she's fine now. But at that time, she needed a lot of help and care at home. So I wasn't really enjoying university anyway. I was like, this isn't what I thought it was going to be. And that advert for the role at GCHQ sort of came up, and it was just I would say the stars aligned, but I did it because I thought I wouldn't get in. I was just interested to see how far I could get in their process. And I was always interested. I was reading a lot of military history, a lot of books around intelligence services and special forces operations and stuff like that. I'd always had an interest in it. And then suddenly find myself helping people fix IT issues was basically my first job. And that was everything from faulty mouses to people in far-flung corners of the world who are having serious issues because there's bombs dropping. Mm-hmm. And it was a very much a baptism of fire, but very, very interesting. And it just reaffirmed that what I wanted to do, and I was in the right place. And over the course of the next few years, moving around into cybersecurity roles, before moving almost, I wouldn't say falling into OSINT space. It was very much I want to go and work there because what the work they do is very, very interesting to me. I thought it was that was super fascinating. You can use the internet to do intelligence investigations and research on people, and that sounds amazing. And here I am now, doing webinars for the OSINT community in the UK and helping businesses protect themselves.
Yeah. How did, what made you decide to look outside the fence, if that makes sense, to go from working at the GCHQ to go outside and do something else?
It's a good question. And I'm still not entirely sure. Because I had it in my mind, I was always going to be there for life. I was like, that's my career. Maybe go somewhere else. But I was like, this is what I'm going to do. And eventually it came to a point where my wife we weren't living in Cheltenham, we weren't living in London. My wife wanted to move back to London. Mm-hmm. And it's a civil service organisation, right? It's public sector. there are rules and regulations around things. And effectively, I couldn't move to London and just have a job, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Because I wasn't based in London, it would be considered I'd be going on a posting, which is a great deal for you as an individual, because like you'll move and they'll pay you for your rent and stuff, and that's amazing. It gives you like these fantastic opportunities. But the flip side is, once you've been somewhere for 2 years, you then get liable for like benefit in kind tax, which I think is like 40%.
Of your salary.
It's either 40% on, like, because it gets treated as like you're getting paid cash for something, or you have to turn around and pay like the tax on the benefit that you're getting. And London rents are, when I first moved to London on a posting, my rent was more than my pay.
Oh.
Like, so I was like, this won't be feasible for me, like long term. And at the time, the National Cybersecurity Centre was still in its infancy, didn't have like a London headquarters. So trying to stay in London was just not viable. And that's when, cybersecurity had started to become obviously more and more prevalent in the press. And I ended up leaving GCHQ about 2 months after the WannaCry ransomware attack. They were not related, but just for like timelines. And I started to see like companies like, at the time, I would say it was like Digital Shadows and Recorded Future seemed to recruit people with similar skill sets to myself. And I was like, well, I can go do this like for companies. That'd be fun, and see what happens. And it just so happens that I ended up getting a job at a company called CTI, Dutch threat intelligence company. And my manager there was in a very similar position to me, having left government work literally about 3 months before he interviewed me. And that's made the interview process very, very easy, because he's like, so tell me what you do and where you work. I'm like, well, I work with this guy, and he's my boss really. And I said, yes, I understand, say no more. Yeah, okay, so you do some research and you can report on things. Like, yeah, I can do that.
Yeah, you're in a situation where you can't talk about what you do in detail, right?
Yeah,
because it's classified basically.
Yeah, it's always those things, because again, like people go, well, what sort of things do you do? And like some people get very like touchy, like really tense about it. I can't say a goddamn thing. Like, oh, if you're a software developer, like just making conversation, they're like, I can't tell you. I'm like, okay.
Yeah, of course you do. But anyway, that's a different discussion. So how's the transition from government work to private sector?
I think initially I actually found it quite hard. Not necessarily because of the transition itself, because CTI are a very, very good company to work at. It was like very chilled, very flexible. Lots of like stuff to help you sort of do well. And technology, I thought the platform that they'd built and the underlying technology and what they wanted to achieve was very interesting ideas, especially at the time. I think I struggled a little bit because the data model they use is Stix taxi, and I'd never come across anything like that really. It was always just like, well, we write reports and like we query data and that's what we do, but we don't like curate it or manage it in a way. And it took me quite a while, because I wasn't a developer at all. I can't code. I was like, I don't kind of get this like language thing. So that took a bit of adjustment. But I think once I got my head around it, you're actually able to then sort of see things and do things with the data that, like, even to them, like, it was very cool. I would still like talk a lot about like Stix. Like, if you're gonna leverage like this data at scale, I think Stix is a really good way to do it. Just finding the right platform to ingest the data and be able to visualize it, because there's a lot of data and it can be quite hard to run on a laptop.
Yeah, I had the same actually when I transitioned. My boss didn't know what to do with me, right? He had no experience with intelligence at all, but he said, there is something here, I want to do something. And I was like, yeah, great, what? You have to figure it out. Right, so I was new to the private sector. I wasn't that, but I was new to the sector of I was working in and new to the whole community, right? Cyber. I never worked in cyber before in that sense, although I had like a degree in cybersecurity. It was intelligence on cybersecurity. So it was a challenge. It took about a year, same as you. And then, found my groove, put my, got my feet under me so I could sort of focus on what I needed to do. But it took a little while to adjust from the, here's the orders, here's what we're going to do, and run. I had no orders, I had no direction, I had nothing, right? So, and not orders in the literal sense, but direction at least. And I was missing that quite a bit. So.
Yeah, I think and that's probably part of my issue as well. So at that time, we sort of broke up the workloads based on like topics. Mm-hmm. So somebody would look at particular like nation state actors or like cybercrime. Over there, somebody would look at like IoT technologies and things like that. I got just like threats to enterprise, which I think we actually named generic threats to enterprise at the time, which is really hard to focus on.
It is, isn't it? It's just everything.
But also like, well, if it's not that and it's not that, it's not that and it's not that, I'm not entirely sure what to build the intelligence project around. I think as a company we really struggled with that. Like that notion of what we actually trying to deliver, and I think eventually it sort of got consumed by other things, which I think just makes logical sense because enterprise threats are going to be the same ransomware, cybercrime groups, to a lesser extent like nation state actors that we're already looking at and trying to build things out, but also the way we were developing the intelligence was a combination of our own research and investigations alongside ingesting different data feeds from different vendors, and then using the Stix data model to sort of fuse it all together. So you could sort of get a more fully pictured view of what different companies see, but then also complemented by like what we were able to derive basically from OSINT as well. And I think it's an interesting model. I don't know if they still take that approach. I think they've probably moved on a little bit. As the company sort of evolved and changed, and a lot of people that were there when I was there have since moved on as well.
I think your story from the cyber realm is familiar for cyber people. It seems to me that this happens a lot, where you come in and then suddenly funding dries up, or what you got described and what you're going to work on actually wasn't real. You're going to do something completely different.
Yeah, and I think the only time I made that decision, I was actually I'm going to take this because it sounds like it's going to be the best move for the career, was, and not as a response to this has not gone like I thought, was when I made that move to Vodafone. And then subsequently like the decision to go to Sky was, this is not really what I signed up for, and I felt like I was getting like skill fade already because I'm not really doing my job at this point. I'm just like trying to fight fires.
Yeah. But at some point here, you actually became a published author. How did that go? I mean, what put you on to writing a book?
That's a good point. So that was early COVID, actually, I think. Early COVID lockdown, 2020. I think.
Too much time in your hand, because that happened to me at least.
I was working late, and I think it got to like midnight, and I thought, I'm gonna have a little whiskey before I go to bed and like put the world to rights. And I think I just tweeted, I was like, I'm gonna start writing a book on threat intelligence, because at the time I don't think there were any, or at least there wasn't really anything that was aimed at an audience that wasn't an analyst. Yeah. So I thought, and by this point, I was like, out of all the companies I'd seen, interacted with, and talked with, they all seemed to think about threat intelligence in a very different way. Mm-hmm. And I felt like that to me felt a bit strange. I was like, well, there's not really any uniform approach to doing it. So why is that? And then I thought, well, I was like, I'm going to write a book and like give you like how you probably should do it, because I've sort of seen it from all sides now. And
what was the title again?
Cyber Threat Intelligence.
Ooh, catchy name.
And I thought, write a book and self-publish it and put some thought into it. And then I ended up writing a couple of chapters, and then you got distracted by the latest shiny object and didn't really think it was gonna get anywhere. Like it was that was a night after one like old fashioned too many, and then my wife suggested trying to find a publisher. It's like, well, you said you were going to do it. Why don't you, you've got this stuff already. Why not try and see what might happen? And most of them rejected me. Some came back and said they were already going to publish similar books. I don't know if they ever got around to it.
No, right? Because I haven't seen too many of them.
Yeah. I think I can't remember which one that was. It might have been O'Reilly. Said they were going to publish a threat intelligence book. I might have been mistaken. But then Press came back to me, who are owned by Springer, and said they'd be interested in publishing it. And that was like, oh, okay. I guess we could do that.
Yeah, and suddenly you have a timeline.
Yeah, and to be fair, I found that process quite comfortable. Their deadlines were not too onerous. It wasn't like every week you need to provide us like a chapter, and like it has to be 2 billion words. Because even when I submitted a chapter, I was like, I'm not sure this is really where I think it should be, or if I had enough to say. And they came back, I was like, well, you wrote like 15 pages. I'm like, clearly got some thoughts on the matter.
Yeah, apparently, yeah.
It's like, you haven't read them yet, but okay.
Yeah, well, that doesn't matter, right? As long as you can, as you said, after a couple of old fashions, it's amazing what you can do, right?
Yeah, but I found that process with the deadlines as well, which, I think that probably helped me a lot. And especially having like almost somebody that you're holding you accountable. Right. I thought that really helped, because I don't think I would ever have done it on my own time. I'd probably still be on like chapter 3 now.
Right. When was it published again?
So I think it came out in August 2021.
21, yeah. So I remember seeing someone publishing or speaking about the book. I found your post. I reached out to you, and we got to have a conversation, because I was thinking about doing something similar about, I created a mind map about about intelligence architecture. How did you do stuff and how did you get to it? And I remember buying your book, reading it cover to cover, and then I called you type of thing, and then asked you all these questions. So that's how we got to know each other, way back then, 4 years ago. The time flies, huh?
That mind map was really cool as well.
Yeah, it is. Oh, of course it is. I mean, of course. So now that we have sort of gone through sort of your background, your history, you decided to go out on your own.
Yes. So when I was coming to the end of working at Arkit, I mentioned like the kind of reports I was writing. Yeah. And that came about from like they were already paying a consultancy for a similar product. Mm-hmm. And they sort of asked like, seems like you could probably do this report. And I was like, well, let me see the report and I'll figure out if it's something that's easily doable. Mm. And I sort of looked at it. I was like, yeah, very comfortably replicate the content of this report. Maybe it's 2 days effort, literally to do the research each month and then put the report together and check it. It's not a huge overtaking, but I was like, it needs some tooling to literally give you a image for image like replica. And it started an idea in my head around, I was like, there's something in this. I don't know if this is it, like the report itself. I don't know if this is it, but there's something in this idea. And then I'd formed Perspective Intelligence in 2020 after when I signed the book deal. Yeah. And originally I was just because I was like, well, feel like that's easier than having to file personal taxes all the time. To have this company handle it. And then I started doing a little bit of OSINT work on the side. It's a bit of side hustle, working with private investigators, getting referrals from people I knew for gigs here and there. And it was like, I never felt like it was going to go anywhere. or amount to anything really at that point. Because I knew I would like to do it one day, and I've always had that like thing of like, well, if I can't save the world, at least I'd rather work for myself than make somebody else rich. Which I don't know where that comes from. I've even from like working in shops and petrol stations as like a teenager, I always felt like, why does he get to drive a nice car and be the boss, and like I'm just an idiot? Like, what's the actual difference between us? So I always had that like drive to like be in charge of my own destiny, which is absolutely terrifying.
Right, for the rest of us, you mean? It's actually inspiring, right? Because you dare to, right? A lot of people think about it, but you dare to. You actually do it, and that's a huge difference.
Yeah, and one of those things that's, at least in the UK, that makes it kind of possible is that there is a relatively reasonable contract market. So you can sort of dip your toe into this idea of running a business, but effectively, you're still serving like a client full time. So it's almost a full time job, but you get to dictate your working hours, how you do your work, where you might work from. Unless you're in like a cleared environment where it's like, actually I need to be in the office because I can't do top secret work in Starbucks. At least you shouldn't do top secret work in Starbucks. No, right. But so I sort of had an opportunity to take a contract role full time, and I thought I'm going to take that leap and see what happens. And I figured the threat intelligence job market has always been pretty good. Yeah. I was like, if this doesn't work out, it's a 6-month contract. In 6 months, try and get another job, and that shouldn't be a problem. I've never had that problem until recently. So I took that sort of step, and in the back of my mind I had this idea about this like reporting product. I was like, well, it's about the company, it's about the business, what is it really? And then I started like doing some research and like trying to figure out how to make it a thing, make it better. And in my head originally I was like, it's just going to be like a reporting product. It's going to send you a report every month around like threats to your business and stuff. What do you care? What should you care about? And trying to figure those things out. So I was like, well, data breaches and, particularly like stealer malware, I think should be number one for most companies. Phishing kits, or if you can get the credentials from phishing kits, that should be really important. Software vulnerabilities that can be exploited that are on internet-facing assets, maybe like VIP monitoring and like digital footprints for executives, so they can understand where they have data exposures, what information is out there in the public domain. And then all the like little other bits around like social media monitoring, like what are people saying about your company? Are there people in your company that have maybe unknowingly shared information that they shouldn't have? Things like technologies that they use at work on their like LinkedIn profile, because in this job I'm a developer in this language and I do these things. Things like you could take that if you were motivated and you wanted to do harm and figure out, okay, well now I know there's vulnerabilities in these technology versions, and I can see that they haven't patched in like 3 years, so I know that this is likely going to work as an initial foothold into a network. And bringing that sort of thing together, along with deep dark web monitoring, stuff like that, and then sort of bring this all together in like a product that kind of makes sense and it's all about you. So cutting away all the superfluous stuff around like what ransomware group X is doing this week and what's happened in that country, or here's a cyber attack that has nothing to do with your business, but it's a good read. Like, let's get away from all that and focus on you. What's your business? What do you care about? And what is in this, like what's out there on the internet, particularly that could affect you? And then let's give you the mitigation advice and the support to try and fix those things. And that's what's been sort of driving me for the last couple of years, has been figuring that out. So we've now named a product. It's called ThreatLens, and we very quickly pivoted from it's a reporting product. So I think this is one of those things around like trying to be a businessman and trying to figure figure this out as you sort of fall along and stumble. It was partly my idea was that it's a reporting service, and then the first company that we pitched the idea to turned around and said, "Well, can I log in?" And I'm like, no. I've got like systems and tools that we use, and we bring it together and then give it to you. And like, yeah, but ideally I'd like to be able to like log in, see my own data, and like sort of make sense of it. The reporting sounds fine, but it'd be great if we could just manage it or like ingest it in some other way, like, you know, into different tools.
Business idea.
I was like, yeah, that sounds great. And I was like, well, you're the first company we've spoken to, and that was literally like question number one. And I think that realized very quickly in my brain, I was like, we have to have a platform. And at the time I was considering doing like white labeling of other services, because I thought it didn't really matter, because actually the product is a reporting service and like briefings and stuff. But then realized actually the value of something like this, and to build a real business, is like you need proprietary data, you need proprietary technology to have something that fundamentally you can build. And so the company has real value, because otherwise it's just, if company X changes their price by like 200% tomorrow, then well, you are going to have to just either stomach it or find an alternative that may or may not give you what you need. And I thought that's, just from a very quick business lesson, it was like, it's not going to work long term. Have to think this through and like figure out how we want to get there. So taking that approach, figuring out like that sort of 5 or 6 key things that the topics need to be, and then what are like the, I guess, modules that would sit under that. And effectively it's just bringing like either data sources that we are collecting ourselves, or third-party data integrations that we can use to help inform the customer about what does their external attack surface really look like. And then the goal with that is anything that's, you know, something like, I guess in normal language it'd be like from a low, medium, high, critical risk scoring. Anything that's like a higher critical gets like an analyst input immediately, and then maybe we also look to leverage like AI technology to give at least an initial summary of what the threat is likely to be and what it might mean. So at least if you log into the platform, you'll see AI said this, the analyst is coming back to me later today with their actual like input and thoughts. So you are getting like that intelligence service, and I'm still very keen that it's not just a software, it's an intelligence product. So when you get something, an alert raised, somebody's assessing it, analyzing it, and giving you the context as to why this looks particularly bad for you.
Yeah. And that's a key element, right? Because there's a lot of vendors who, well, we do that. No, you do generic. Most vendors, do generic. They flag something as important because, oh my gosh, this vulnerability got CVS score this. Yeah, but why is this relevant to me? That's where a lot of the vendors, if not all of the vendors, fail miserably. So it's like a fresh of breath air to hear someone who now is in vendor space, says, well, this is really important because it's important to you in your context.
Yeah, and I think on that point, particularly around vulnerabilities, like the number of tools that don't really take into account things like EPSS for like the exploit predictability, or simple like Google search of like for exploit code for a vulnerability that looks bad because the EPSS might be high. And those are relatively, from like an OSINT standpoint, those are very simple things to achieve. But it's like, but bringing that context, saying, okay, this is bad for you because A, it's on an internet-facing like system. B, the exploit code is here on GitHub. Here's the link, and anyone could theoretically use this to target you. And and there'll be things. So whilst we're recording this, the latest Citrix whoopsie daisy is sort of making the rounds in the news. That was huge a couple of years ago. The first time it came around.
Yeah. And now it's been so normal that everyone's like, oh, yet another Citrix, huh?
Yeah. But that's that kind of thing where it's, and a lot of companies will go, oh, this is terrible. You must be aware about all these things. Sure, but only if you use Citrix. Like, and I guess,
or only if it is in the context of is internet, facing, and or it is reachable in some way, shape, or form. Yes, then you need to do something now. But because we have put in place these mitigations, then it's not relevant to you now, but it might be tomorrow if we learn more about it. Yeah. So it needs to be, you need to know about it, type of thing.
Yeah, and I think part of that comes from really treating it as an intelligence product as well, is taking that approach and saying, well, when we talk to you and we define effectively like your intelligence requirements as a customer, yourselves, what you care about, and if you see something like this, we're really concerned, or if you see this, like, that's probably okay. That will defer like how maybe we will reach out to you like with like email or a call and tell you about what we've identified because it's serious, versus okay, well, when we give you a report at the end of the month, we'll just put that information in there because it's according to you not a priority. And I think as well, having that ongoing relationship enables you to have those conversations where we go, okay, so we reported on I'll use the Citrix thing as an example, we reported on that, and you said that you are comfortable that you've got the right mitigations in place, that it's not internet facing and it's not a problem. So next time there's a story about it, we will just let you know, and we won't like raise the alarm or tell you the world's on fire. And I feel like just taking that kind of almost personalized approach to it doesn't take a lot in terms of like your workload or your effort, because you're still going to write a report for that customer. It's just about identifying where and when you need to actually point something out. And my whole driving force with that was, if I turn around and tell you something's worth your time and effort, that by taking that approach, that when we say that, you'll set up a take notice, and hopefully we'll avoid the fact you get a ransomware attack. And ultimately, if you can do that across like your external attack surface, then as long as you're doing the basic stuff right inside, and ultimately use a bloody password manager, and please put multi-factor authentication on a VPN.
Some of the minimum requirements needs to be in place, and I think a lot of small to medium businesses fail in that sort of realm, if you will.
Yeah, and I think that's initially I thought building the product out, this was small businesses, that'd be perfect. Not all small businesses. Even that's like as you're learning to run a business like from nothing, and without having a successful startup exit behind me to fall back on, like figuring out like you need to figure out that product market fit and what size business, because there will be a minimum. But that's also fed into, I think, how we even sell the product, and around like taking like a really modular approach to it. So, not all companies will want all the things, because invariably you've already paid a company money and they do this, and this. But actually what I wouldn't mind is a little bit like that VIP protection. Can we only just have that? A lot of companies would turn around and say no. Like, yeah,
it's the package, take it or leave it. Yeah, we want all your money, not just some of your money.
Yeah, and I find that really strange, because at the same time, like, well, if you do well there, then down the road, like that delayed gratification type thing, where at some point they'll probably turn around and say, well, actually, we're quite happy with how you've handled this. Maybe you could take on this bit of work as well. And I also think that enables us to go against some of, I'd say, like the big boys, and some of the companies we're talking to are interested in some of these things. And I'd never get in the door if I was like, I'm going to take down, I don't know, CrowdStrike. I'm never going to defeat CrowdStrike if I try to fight them on like every product they have. But actually, we do this one thing and we could offer you that. And I don't think they quite offer that. So,
or it's like even better perhaps in some parts, if they do. Not necessarily them, but yeah.
Yeah, and I think just that approach just feels like, talking to some people, it's just like, it's a breath of fresh air. It's like, I'm just trying to figure this out, like, because I'm an idiot. Because literally, I feel like I'm a moron, and I can see that if I just like try to placate that you would want this thing and not all of it, why wouldn't I do that? Apart from the fact that I can only charge you like £5 instead of 20. Like, it makes no sense to me why we wouldn't take that approach, especially as, at the moment we're such a small business, and the initial like MVP of the product is where we really need to figure out if it's going to work or not.
Yeah. You mentioned something through our conversation so far. You work with open source intelligence as well. And in that, I guess you're part owner of, or some way, shape, or form, in the Case company. Tell us a little bit about that.
Is at the moment a online training platform with narrative-led sort of OSINT training. It's not training in the most, I guess, literal sense of the word. Like, we don't teach you how to go onto Google and look for things or do things. It's like most of the scenarios are sort of capture the flag style. So it's, you need to answer this question to unlock the next bit. But because it's narrative led and story driven, like, people find them really engaging. So you can sort of, you get to solve the murder, you get to find the missing girl, you get to find who the creepy stalker is. And that has gone down really, really well. We're in the process at the moment of trying to develop those in some actual real world OSINT training, which will be sort of practical, hands-on, in a room with people. I'm really, really excited about it, because I think there's a lot of stuff we can take from the scenarios and how people engage with them, but bring that into like a training environment where it's not necessarily like, today we're going to talk about social media and we'll do all the social media things. It can be a lot more interactive, and I think almost teaching the individuals around how to like approach being an open source intelligence analyst by giving you the tools to figure out where you would go to find this stuff out, rather than what I teach you today is out of date tomorrow, which is the issue we have with a lot of OSINT stuff.
And I've done that too. I mean, I'm not done, but been part of training where the instructor shows off all the cool things that he or she can do. And then they go, bananas on all the different tools, you can do all these amazing things. And, you're there and go, oh, holy moly, this is great. But when you come back, you quickly understand that, hey, maybe that tool isn't available anymore, or, that source, that website, is taken down. Whatever the case might be, the issue is you have never learned how to actually find or apply the logic behind it. Why am I going there to source A rather than source B? How are you doing critical thinking? How are you using intelligence methodology? Those were the things that are probably missing in most of the training I've seen. And, it's all about all the cool things the instructor can do rather than actually providing value, perhaps sometimes to the students. Yeah.
And I think, by doing those in-person trainings as well, I think if you do it at like an organization level, you can take a little bit of context there, and then when you go through those things, if somebody then says, oh, actually, we do a lot of work on, say, Facebook as a platform, and they go, okay, all right, let's take 10, 15 minutes. All right, if you're going to try and do things on Facebook, here's some tools that you could use, which are fantastic, but you're going to find at some point they're either not going to work anymore, or for whatever reason, like, you don't have access. Like this. So what are we finding out here, and why do we need that information? And things like, invariably, a lot of like online profiles, things like user IDs, those tend to be static. They don't change. They're like hard coded for that user account, versus something like a username or like a vanity name, which, anyone can change. So Dave Smith today can be Sarah Jones tomorrow. I've really struggled to find a surname now. But understanding, like, well, actually, if I can go into the source code on the web page and I can look specifically, I know what the numbers look like and I know how to find it in that little bit of information, just that little thing can be really useful. Because that's not something that's ephemeral, and you can refer back to it when you put your intelligence report together as well, because, obviously, when you write the report, everything needs to be sort of past tense, because that's how it was when you collected it or did that research. At least you know that number isn't going to be something that changes by the time whoever reads your report and wants to take action on it will do something. I think that's especially important in like anything that's in like law enforcement environment, or any cases where you have like court proceedings, for whether it's civil or like criminal matters.
Yeah, and one of the things I like about Case is that you guys try to apply intelligence, tradecraft, and intelligence methodology in the training, or in the sort of the cases where you follow sort of a stakeholder with a requirement, and you try to have some standards in terms of the reporting and how it should be. So it isn't just OSINT. It isn't just copy pasting stuff on LinkedIn or from Twitter or X, and just building a link chart and that's it. Adding analysis, adding context, source and information evaluation, stuff that's important for perhaps making decisions or at least making assessments. And that I really, really enjoy that.
Yeah, I think that really comes to the fore in the Project Sandshark scenario, which is the biggest one. But weirdly, it's the one where case kind of does the least, if that makes sense. Yeah. So effectively, with Sandshark, you get the scenario and the intelligence requirement, and then it's kind of up to you.
Yeah. You can choose your path based on your hunch or your inclination or whatever the data and information you found takes you, which I really like because that's more real life, right?
Yeah, and that was very much a conscious decision to take that approach, because the CTF style I think is great, and it's written fun, right? Because you get to do the story and you get to find out who did what and who was the evil Scooby-Doo villain at the end, but that's again sort of training can have like its limit in terms of like the applicability to you in real life. Like at some point you'll be like, well, when am I ever going to do like a search for a Wi-Fi ID in a location when I only work on this specific like subset of like topic that's that might never cross that path. And again, I think that's one of those things where traditional training it's always been very flashy and very, look at this, it's amazing, look at that, that's amazing. And you're like, yeah, it's great, but the applicability to you and your day-to-day role is actually where you can fall down. And with Sandshark specifically, that approach, it's so open-ended, depending on where your skills lie, where you're comfortable, and what your background is, you can go down these routes. So if you could write a report that's 90% about corporate structures, and there's stuff to find. You can go down the social media rabbit hole and there's things you'll find. And, you can bring all that stuff together. I think the only thing I've not seen yet for it is like dark web stuff. And I don't actually know if there's dark web stuff to find for it from the top of my head. But I'm sure, there's going to be stuff out there, whether in like data breaches and things like that, which we could bring in for that kind of thing. So with the in-person training, we are looking at that sort of approach as well. So during the like a 3-day workshop, maybe there's a scenario that is maybe a bit more in the traditional sense, a bit more CTF-y that kind of coincides with how we lead the training. But ultimately there'll be like a capstone exercise at the end, which will be again very open-ended. Here's your intelligence requirement. Go out, do your research, draft up a report. Maybe we'll do like a initial review, like stakeholder engagement role play type thing, or maybe it will just be an assessment. But it should give the students the opportunity to go out, practice that tradecraft in an environment which is safe, because ultimately everything that we'll create is made up, right? So especially in like the CTF ones, everything's made up, and those are quite a lot of work. With some of the more open-ended ones, they tend to be based on real cases, just because you can't fabricate business records. That would be quite a issue, I think. But still, it's like it's all publicly information. And again, the idea is obviously during the training you get told like around ethics and how you should operate a sock puppet account, what you shouldn't be doing, how you should approach an investigation, and giving all that initial like robustness around what it takes to do those investigations and the infrastructure you should consider using and how you make these decisions. So at least you can take those things, do your investigations without compromising like a real life case or anything that you might work on in your day-to-day, where you've tried something and you've pressed the wrong button and you've tried to connect to the drug dealer on Instagram or something like that, which we've all done.
So we talked a lot about intelligence and cyber threat intelligence. What is and what isn't intelligence in your mind? Right, that's a broad and difficult question. So,
And I'm gonna throw it back at you, I think, because you kind of said it a minute ago. I think that intelligence is where you take not necessarily even a question or a requirement always, because sometimes you can be proactive, but where you can take data or information and you can contextualize it for somebody else who then has an enhanced understanding on something that they either can take an action on or informs their broader awareness about something, which is a very fluffy and very vague answer. But I think you can provide proactive intelligence around a potential military threat that might help somebody understand what might be going on in a third-party country. Mm-hmm. You could also do that in cyber by monitoring forums and seeing who's posting what companies seem to be targeted. You know, at the moment, in the last couple of months as we record this, Scattered Spider have hit retail stores in the UK, and I think as of last week they seem to be hitting airlines at the moment. And you know, that's one of those things where we assign them as a name as a group. Is it the same people? I don't know. In all likelihood, it probably isn't just the same individuals, but they all seem to be well aligned and following the same modus operandi. And I think that what's really important is the context. I think ultimately it always comes down to context. I can give you a load of information in a report, and I can show you all the fancy link analysis charts. And I've got a regular client who I sometimes send him like a multi-year chart. And I literally, I'm just showing you this so you can sort of see like how much like data points there are to like follow up on. I don't expect you to understand it. He's like, I haven't got a clue what I'm looking at. It's like, what even is this?
yeah. And what is intelligence not? What isn't intelligence?
Anything that isn't timely, relevant, or actionable. But I think also anything where you're not answering like a requirement, a question, or providing that context. I think if it's just here's some information and there's never a so what or a why, like great, it's fantastic to know that, you know, Maureen is having an affair with Steve, and you know, Steve's wife is having an affair with Dave the plumber. Like, it's great information, but why do I need to know that?
Yeah, right. And yeah, that's an interesting part, right? Because there's this discussion of OSINT versus OSINT, right? Where in my experience, I think it's overwhelmingly OSINT, where people are taking data and information and present it as OSINT, as intelligence, where in actual fact, to me, it is data or information at best sometimes. And that, to me, is a little worrisome, right? And that goes back to one of the key topics I'm talking about is we have standards in the intelligence community, but in private sector with OSINT and cyber threat intelligence, there aren't any common, at least in the private sector, standards to follow. And anyone can be do OSINT. And apparently everyone does, in terms of when you see all these people who claim to do OSINT while they're actual fact doing OSINT. It's unpopular, I know, but you know, I think it's important to highlight that. And again, the case scenarios is actually highlighting that as well, which I think it's yeah, I applaud that.
I think as cybersecurity matures as an industry, and I guess threat intelligence itself is a subset of that, as you bring in junior people, I think, and I guess one of the things that was, I guess, a blessing and a curse for threat intelligence as a business is that probably in 15 years ago when it started to become a thing, it was drawn from people out of intelligence agencies, law enforcement, the military, who all had an idea of what intelligence was and how you would use it, and there you go, we're just going to apply it over here and get paid handsomely for it. But you lose that a little bit, I think, when you have matured as an industry and now you hire somebody from the street who doesn't have that background to fall on or fall back on. And that's not necessarily a negative, because there's probably a lot of things that we bring from like a military, law enforcement, intelligence agency background, which can be quite annoying to somebody who comes from the outside. Like, why do you call these, why have you got these funny terms and stuff, or like acronyms all over the place? But at the same time, I think it's very important that we have the right training offerings and the right opportunities for people to learn these fundamental things, because, you know, if you are trying to set up a threat intelligence team and you don't have a set of requirements, you're just stabbing around in the dark looking for something, hoping you find information that somebody's going to find useful, and invariably you're going to miss things because you don't know what you don't know. And like those unknown unknowns are always like the thing that we should be worried about. And bringing that sort of fundamental knowledge and understanding around like requirements and like structured analytic techniques, not taking what somebody who, you know, posts on Twitter says literally for granted, because, you know, you don't know who they are, what their background is, if they might be aligned with cyber criminals rather than being useful to society or not.
Yeah, or just an useful idiot, you know, just copy pasting someone else's material. Yeah, and this is the critical thinking part where I see that we have a lot of work to do with a lot of people, I guess, in terms of having the critical thinking helps you sort of at least question everything you read and everything you see. You know, what is the source? Who does it come from? You know, what are they trying to say? What is the motivation for them to say it? And how would that affect me? And if I were to do it or not, how would that affect sort of, if I believe that person or not, how would that affect my decision process? All of these things are really good in terms of disinformation, misinformation, malinformation, and identifying and do something with it, right? For all of us. But from an intelligence perspective, when we do analysis and we have to do some sort of assessment, we also have to figure out the sourcing and information and the, you know, who's behind this and what is behind it in some cases when we have AI and other bots out there. There's a lot of things to take into account. I'm guessing because you have been around quite a bit and also, you know, running your own company, teaching and training. What type of training and courses and certifications, etc., have you done to get to where you are today?
That's a really good question. I mean, genuinely, going back to the start, I did a training program which was a combination of like internal trainings and then like some external trainings. Some of that was around like just like cyber in general. So it was like, you know, little hands-on like intro to pen testing or intro to like hacking, introductions to like Wireshark and network analysis and stuff like that. And then more sort of like bespoke internal training around like OSINT Tradecraft and stuff like that. Running and then, you know, doing like capture the flag events like internally as well. In terms of private sector training over the last few years, I'm doing a couple at the moment. I've just done Certified Ethical Hacker, which was an interesting course. Like I agree with the instructor, and I think the name is one of those things. Like it's got this misnomer now around it's like a hacking course, and it's not really that. The content is very much around like foundations of like cyber and cyber attacks and how they can happen. It's not necessarily about like you, by the end of this course, you are going to be like
proficient in hacking, right? Knowing how to do more than just installing Linux.
Yeah, and I think also, because I mean that certification itself has had a pretty bad reputation a few years ago in earlier versions, but the new one was actually, the content itself I thought was actually pretty good. It was an intense few days because it's very slide heavy, but the content was good and the lab seemed pretty good. I'm also doing the TCM security SOC analyst certificate at the moment, mostly because I realize like I'm very pigeonholed as like a threat intelligence OSINT person, and I feel that a little bit. And I think just having some of that exposure and knowledge around what does SOC analysts actually do. I've got an idea about what they do, but actually getting in there and being able to work through those processes and those flows, and I feel like that's just going to make me better at being able to understand and interpret what customer wants. And I find their training actually really, really good. And anyone who's considering like cyber career, I always they're one of the first places I point people to, because the training is very affordable, but it's also very detailed, and they design it in ways that it's practical as well, so you can follow along with the video training and literally put these things directly into practice, and it all gets explained to you. Like, this is why we're doing this, rather than, I guess the one thing I would say about the CEH course is that the exam is a closed book, like, knowledge.
Yeah, what you remember rather than, applying.
Yeah, and those, I guess, have their place. But also I feel like that's part of the reason why I'd say it's not really like a hacking certification, really, because
you're not demonstrating proficiency. You're demonstrating your memory.
Yeah. And whilst like the instructor said, it's relatively straightforward to pass, there's a lot of content. You still have to be able to like know that stuff. And if you struggle with like some of those command line things where it's like, which switch do you use in Nmap to achieve this goal, and you're like, it could be any of them. It's like little things like that. But he also did reassure us that it's not designed to trip you up like some other certifications.
One correct and all the rest of them are wrong, clearly wrong. Yeah. If you know the material. Okay, I get that. Yeah.
Whereas I think some certifications like CISM or CISP, the questions can be intentionally designed to try and trip you up a little bit, which is frustrating. And also it's 2025, like, having a closed book exam when there are ways and means of getting people to get tested that could actually show their efficiency or their capability of achieving a goal seems better. And that's another reason why I really like the TCM approach. I'd also check to bring this back to intelligence as well. I'm going to butcher his name. I always do. There's a Polish guy called Michael Koszewara, but we've never met in real life, so I've never had the opportunity to actually ask. But he has a training course on adversary hunting, and it's specifically around like malware infrastructure, and it's incredible. It's like one of those things. It's mostly written content, but you can follow along. It's designed around getting you to sort of figure out how you can use tools like Shodan and Census and similar tools to basically build out rules for finding like malware C2 servers and effectively indicators of attack. So you're getting way up like the kill chain to be able to be like proactively respond and block things before you can like worry about it. And obviously, like something like that, the ultimate goal is if you can find all the C2s for something like Cobalt Strike, they're online, like on any given day, and you can block them all. Well, if you do get an intrusion, then you're probably going to be okay, because they're not going to do anything. Or at least that's the idea. And for the most part, where attacks are opportunistic by nature, and you're probably not going to be dealing with like a super motivated adversary who's coming after you specifically. The likelihood is at that point I'm going to go, oh, no, this is rubbish. They're not going to suddenly become like ninjas and switch to a completely different like framework to try and get at you. They might try some living off the land stuff, but again, as long as you've got the right mechanisms in place, and if you start seeing connections to an IP that you've blocked, then hopefully you've got other mechanisms in place to mitigate that. But his adversary hunting course is fantastic. So
you've been part of both starting, running, and implementing, I guess, some intelligence methodologies in different contexts. So that's good. What would you say are success criteria to be able, if anyone wants to set up an intelligence function or build up cyber threat intelligence, what would you say are success criteria for that to survive the first year at least?
So I think the first thing is you need to probably shout from the rooftops that you don't serve the SOC and only the SOC.
Yeah.
I think a threat intelligence team fundamentally has to work from the board down, because you need to understand business direction, you need to understand business priorities, because that can inform what you then choose to write reports on and what you raise as a serious issue. And then you almost have the receipts then to back that up. You say, well, actually the company direction is we're opening an office in this country, and you're going to say we can't do that because bad actors operate there, but it is happening, so we're going to have to handle this one way or another, and this is what we recommend we should do about that. Like little things like that, I think really, really important, as well as establishing like that requirements capture process. Speak to all the stakeholder teams you think could make use of threat intelligence, and not all of them will always be willing to talk to you, but being proactive in that sort of stakeholder and relationship management is really important, because there will be opportunities and things that come out that would never come up otherwise. When I was at Sky, we did some great work with like the anti-piracy team, and it been quite easy to never talk to them, but ultimately like, what you guys researching? Oh, we're trying to get on like naughty forums and find bad people selling things. Oh, we do that too. Oh, there's some Tradecraft tips that might be helpful. Or I've seen this stuff. Here you go. Give me 10 minutes. There you go. I think that person's a villain. Go after them. So having those conversations, and then likewise finding out that this team over here would actually get a lot of value out of information relating to this particular topic. It's something you probably wouldn't have thought of, but now you've got something you can actually be tangible on. Along with the requirements capture process, you can start to record those like metrics and stuff. So, okay, we can collate all that information. Intel 471 have an amazing spreadsheet for this, where you can put all your requirements in aligned with their Intel requirements handbook, and then it weights things, and you can sort of actually build out your priorities and know where you probably need to spend money, because you'll say, right, this is what the business is telling us we care about. This is what we know we can cover. This is where we know we have gaps. And then you can figure out how to either spend more time researching on those or finding the right tools to answer those questions. And I think that's really important, because you can go in and you can turn around and say, right, we're going to buy this vendor, and this vendor. But why? Ultimately, it's again like that intelligence question. So what? And I think I see that a lot, where companies will go in and they'll defer to one of the big vendors, but they don't really know what they're doing. Like in terms of like, not from they don't know what they're doing in their skills or their capabilities, but from what are they doing from a intelligence standpoint to protect the business that isn't just regurgitating like bleeping computer.
Yeah, and bleeping computer is not the primary source. Okay, good.
It might be.
Sometimes. Sometimes they actually write their own stuff. They do, but most of the time it isn't, as far as I have at least seen. Another thing I wanted to touch on is when we look into let's say, the crystal ball, what do you think will change in terms of how we'd use intelligence or how we use cyber threat intelligence going forward?
I am cautiously optimistic about how we could leverage like large language models in this space, particularly where we're ingesting significant amounts of data. So you think like things like IOC feeds and stuff like that. Being able to have an LLM sort of maybe identify trends in that data or some of those detection rules, because, okay, well, I know that this is bad, and then I see all this other data that we're sort of ingesting which isn't got the right context, but these all match up. And I think maybe that's where particularly maybe junior threat analyst, maybe that's where that sort of goes, where you get the detection rules from like the LLM that's assessed it, and it's ascertaining that this looks like it could be related to this particular type of threat, and then you can sort of verify that, and you can do those manual checks and sort of confirm. I feel like that sort of use case is really interesting. And also, I guess, if I think a bit broader, especially as at the rate at which like changes in the landscape seem to be evolving every other week, but are we going to see things like honeypot networks run by AI agents? Like, I could definitely see something like that becoming a thing. I don't know if it would work at this stage.
I want to jump into one thing that you talked about before, and we talked about sort of if someone were to want to apply intelligence or CTI and start working with it, what should they do? That was first. Now, how can they demonstrate value? What are your thoughts on that?
That's always the hard one.
It is, isn't it? It shouldn't be, but it is.
Yeah, I guess intelligence by its nature is qualitative more than quantitative. Mm-hmm. I mean,
it could be both, but intelligence analysis and result often is,
yeah, I guess actually I've probably done it a disservice there by saying that. I think quantitative is useful as an internal metric, because especially when you've got your set of requirements, you can track how many reports you've issued versus each requirement, things like that. That can be useful. And also, like, when you review those requirements, if suddenly like we haven't written any reports about this topic in the last 6 months, nobody's asked us, right? So maybe that's not something we focus on anymore. Or we only do it if somebody asks about something. I think that's where you can use like those metrics. And to latch on onto that, I want to avoid the whole how many reports have we written, rather than how many pieces of valuable information or intelligence have you produced. Those are two completely different approaches. Oh yeah, 100%.
And it has its place, right, in CTI.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, and again, I think like, how many reports on ransomware did we write this year? Like, does it matter? Because actually, it can be useful to track if, like, okay, yeah, we have focused on that subject a lot, but ultimately, why did we write that many reports, and what value has that really derived from us? And I guess to come back to your question, that qualitative, like, assessment has to be almost like intelligence cycle, right? So it's like feedback from the customers ultimately, which is always the hard part. But part of the thing and the reason for setting up like a requirements program in the first place is that, sure, you can't expect them to respond to you every time you write a report with like their like 10-page review, 5 out of 5 stars, etc. But what you can do is every few months you catch up, and then you get an idea of like, well, are these products hitting the mark with you? If they're not, why not? Or if they're great, and is there anything else you want to see in them? Like, that kind of feedback is something you can use to make sure you are measuring that value. And I guess you can always, and then if you start seeing like the same responses and feedback, then you can adjust and you can pivot and figure out how to deliver more value. And I think that also comes down to things like source evaluation all the time. Like, what new data sources are there? What new tools could we leverage? Just because we use this paid tool because it was really good like 5 years ago, is there anything else on the market that might do the same job and better that we could use?
Yeah, I call it source bias. We as analysts have a tendency to use the same old tool that we always did, rather than exploring alternatives, like you just said. And I think that's an important part that we need to highlight a little bit. And don't always fall down the same path. Try to explore and expand the horizon of different viewpoints, different sources, so you can always learn more and actually find sometimes better and more useful information and data you need for your analysis.
Yeah, and I think particularly in teams where there's maybe not as much budget, that could be very difficult when you've got like one vendor and that's like your single pane of glass view of the world. Like, that's why something like open source intelligence has to come into play, where you have to be able to, you almost want to verify the findings as well, because there have been instances over the years where vendors have put out reports that the community has then pushed back on and said, "What are you talking about? Like, the findings in this report are nonsensical," and then here's the reasons why, and it's the kind of thing that shouldn't have got past like a quality assurance test in the first place, let alone like a company blog. But you still have to bear that in mind. Like, people make mistakes, and you can go down a rabbit hole and see things that aren't really there, or confirmation bias kicks in, and you're just seeing the things you want to see, and then before you know it, like, you're doing things, and you're like, oh, we need to respond to this and do these things, and actually you don't, because it's not your business that's affected by it. I think that's really important, and I think hopefully, to, I guess, bring back that question around like AI and stuff, maybe we even have like an internal to like quality check report. Like, does this marry up with what we've previously seen or reported on, or what data is in our threat intelligence platform? Like, am I hitting the right things? And depending on the model, it's probably just going to tell you what a brilliant idea that was, at least at this stage.
And speaking of AI, I think we can't do an interview and have a conversation without talking a little bit more about AI. When a lot of people talk about AI, they talk about LLMs. So we're going to focus on LLMs here for the next couple of minutes. When we talk about LLMs in this context of applying intelligence and using it for intelligence and analysis and automation and machine learning, etc., how do you think that will change how we do intelligence going forward?
That's a really good question. I don't know if it will. Interesting. Because I think ultimately what, intelligence has survived basically forever, right, as an industry, before computers. And, after World War V, like, there probably might not be computers anymore. But ultimately, I think what it really boils down to is the nature of what we do won't change. How we go about doing it might. And I think I see it as more just an extra tool in the box. So some of the things I've been looking at in the last year or so, like when we get like a ransomware group chat leaks, can we use like a local LLM to do some summaries or some translations, see what's interesting in that content? And even like, at the moment, that's really hard to do, I think, because just the amount of that data that comes out, you need to be very like systematic or very picky with like what parts you feed into like a local model on a reasonable laptop just to get some replies. But that's going to change over time. Like this sort of technology always does. Will we go to like a fully automated AI led or LLM led intelligence analyst? I don't think so. I think, are we ever going to have that level of confidence that it hasn't hallucinated something? Yeah. And ultimately, will we see? I feel sorry for picking on CrowdStrike here, but will we see an event like where the CrowdStrike update issue that happened last year? Like, if we had something like that happen, that was solely down to like an AI model, that's going to affect, a lot of companies, but also then, there's going to be questions asked, and then before you know it, the Good Ideas Club, aka the politicians, will get involved, and there'll be like inquiries, and they'll put out all their best ideas. That being said, I think like because of the rate at which the tech is evolving, and at the moment, I wonder if like AI is a little bit of a misnomer when the quantum computing threat is, on that horizon and getting closer. Like, what are we going to do when that happens? If all encryption breaks immediately, and a great war kicks off because suddenly everyone realizes everybody is spying on each other or something. Like, there's so much nuance and so many rabbit holes that we could go down. But I think ultimately it's very impossible to say. But I think ultimately how we do intelligence is probably not going to change. Maybe the rate at which we're able to collect data and get some interpretation or summaries of that data, that's obviously going to change hugely. I don't think it's going to be far off with being able to almost ingest like the internet as a fire hose and get the AI to, in real time, do summaries of things. maybe not at that scale, but I'm sure when you get to like nation state level, there will be things going on there that can help identify what looks to be like the latest threat. For a threat intelligence analyst working in a company, maybe it's just like the phishing emails and the voice phishing and all these other like social engineering tactics are just going to get better. I think like the deep fake stuff, like the North Korean job interviews and all that kind of thing, like that technology is crazy. It's only going to get better. I've experimented with the deep fake like live streaming camera a little bit just to try and understand it, and I was surprised at how effective it was at replacing this ugly mug with The Rock. Except The Rock had my beard and he looked a bit weird.
And with glasses.
And with glasses, but like you could move your face around, you could talk, and everything looks in line, especially if you've got reasonable lighting. Like it's really hard to tell, and that's like an early stage open source product. Like that's not evolved to like an enterprise ready for market type solution. So I think things like that are going to really...
It's going to challenge us, right? Yeah, it will.
I think there's also been times where like voice imitation stuff's been used before. I know, I want to say it was Rachel Toback did like a piece for CNN a couple of years ago where she, with his permission, as a billionaire, his name was Jeffrey Katz, I think. I can't remember off the top of my head. But she agreed with him and he was like, okay, you can hack me. Like, see what you could achieve. And very like straightforward, like social engineering ultimately, but if you're able to convince his assistant on the phone that he'd received an email, but he was having difficulty getting access to the internet, could you open the email for me? Just voice changer. And she's like this little American girl, she's not this tall American man. Very different voices, but using that technology, the assistant does what she's asked, and then she's like, well, I'm on your computer now and I could do these things and blah 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 blah, and it was like 30 seconds, and all I needed was like a video of you from YouTube where you talk in an interview to imitate that. I think like that's where I see like the biggest challenges for us as an industry. But it also quite excites me about the possibility of like where they might go almost like in the realms of like entertainment and stuff. I think there's stuff where you can do things where somebody's worked on a project and then you can use this technology to like finish that story or whatever, because if a person dies or they have a falling out or something. I think like there's stuff there that can be really interesting, like restorations of old content, all that kind of thing. Like this technology can be like really impactful from that kind of stuff as well. You imagine watching like World War II in 4K, like HDR, and actually like seeing it like it was a Netflix movie today, and actually getting a sense of what it really was like there without having to like struggle through grainy footage. I feel like that sort of thing could be really, really amazing.
Yeah. There's so many amazing things we can do. Absolutely. So if anyone wants to start working with intelligence, what do you think they need to do? What should they bring? What should they, education-wise, personality-wise, what would make a good intelligence person? I mean, I made it, you made it. We're completely different personalities and background, but we still made it. We worked on different things, but still, there is always room for anyone. Yeah. What would your... If we do intelligence first, then we can do cyber afterwards.
I think ultimately intelligence encourages diversity of thought. So I think the first thing I would always say is being in a room full of yourself, like everyone's the same, you're not going to have great output as a team, because everyone does the same thing and has the same outlooks and beliefs is always going to look at things in the exact same way. Maybe subtle differences, but ultimately it's a lot of the same bit of cake. Whereas people from different backgrounds, different educations, different ethnicities, everything can, I think that adds quite a lot. And you just get points of view and insights from things, and it just really encourages like more well-rounded analysis as a whole. And I think so anyone who thinks intelligence is for like middle-class white people with from you know, good family homes and stuff, like, absolutely not.
No, they couldn't be more wrong, actually.
I think that might have been the case 50 years ago. But you know, the world has moved on, and you know, organizations have changed as well, and I think they've all really embraced that. You know, I just think like Alan Turing's probably one of the greatest heroes the UK has when it comes to like, you know, wartime like legends, and the way the UK treated him was abhorrent. But now you know, I think they've done a lot of good work. Like I said, the UK as a whole has done, or at least the government's done a lot of good work in like actually trying to restore that like support and that adulation that we should have for somebody like him. So firstly, that I would say, like, diversity of thought, diversity of background is a great thing. So I wouldn't worry about that. What I would worry about is, if you want to be an intelligence analyst, you have to be like kind of analytical. Like, you have to be naturally curious to things, and like maybe borderline ADHD about stuff. Like, you want to go in on this subject because I'm
laser focused on certain things, and you really, you know, yeah.
I mean, I'm not diagnosed as ADHD, but I'm pretty confident on.
Yeah, surprisingly, me neither. But again, I'm also pretty confident that I have something, you know, because I really laser focus when I first start, and I really excel at it. If that makes sense. It's weird sometimes.
You just get in the zone, and then before you know, it's like 3 a.m. and oh my god, I've been listening to lo-fi beats on Spotify for 3 days.
Yeah, and just enjoying every second of it too. But you know, that's fine. So if anyone wants to do cyber threat intelligence, what should they do? Any different, or you know?
I think ultimately that inquisitive nature is still obviously going to be very, very important. But again, cyber is one of those things that can be like as hard as you want to make it, or it can be not that hard. I think you can be an amazing threat intelligence analyst and not be that technical. You need to understand like the crux of what's happened and like why you're going to be reporting on something. But if you want to go down the route of being like a strategic analyst, you don't need to know the nuts and bolts about how exactly this malware works and what it does and what commands it executes and like all that stuff. You know, there are plenty of goblins that can do that for you. But I think you probably do need to have an interest in computing, at least to some extent. And you need to be technical enough to understand the core concepts. I think if you can get your head around like networking, at least at a high level, and a few of those like tools and stuff, that puts you in a really strong position to be able to then, like, as you're reading a report, understand like the context of what's going on.
Yeah, at least enough to understand the types of malware. If something's beaconing, what does that mean? You know, there are certain things you just need to understand from an intelligence analysis perspective. On that note, thank you so much for taking the time to support both the PhD research and also the podcast.
It's been delightful.
Yeah, it has been. It's been fantastic.